I don't know what we can talk about in this nation without talking about white superiority, honestly.
Who defines the meaning of God also defines the relationship between economy and God.
African Americans spent $1.3 trillion last year, making us the 16th wealthiest nation in the world. Why have we not turned those riches into wealth to develop our community?
Good evening, family. Not really sure what happened. It's been that type of day today. Technology has a way of kind of doing what it wants to do. It kind of threw us off right in the middle of our broadcast. But want to thank everyone for coming back and joining us. Definitely, we're going to need some help with this go around. We had a nice audience in the building. People I'm sure have gone and to do other things now. But if we can, collectively, we can take this opportunity to reach out to those people who have made went out do some other things by sharing the link. We definitely want to get the word out, get the link out to people. Share the video, like the video, comment on the video. We're going to pick up where we left off. We were talking about the relationship with the Renaissance statue in Senegal to the African mind, African philosophy, or African deep thought, and how it relates to the principles of the universe as the Africans, as we see them. In ancient Kemet, obviously, we know is an example of that and have laid the groundwork for that. Dr. Jeffries also enumerated the individuals who were at the conference several years ago when the Renaissance statue opened, and quite a few of them will be in attendance at the One Africa Return to the Source conference in Kemet, February 25th and 26th. To be a part of this, you can come on the study tour. The dates of the study tour are February 20th to 28th, where the study tour will culminate into the conference in Aswan, Egypt. He mentioned Dr. Wade Nobles, Dr. Vera Nobles, himself, his wife. He also mentioned Dr. Theophilo Benga. These are all people who will be at the conference presenting. And he also mentioned the great ancestor and a friend, beloved scholar, and elder of ours, Dr. Minoko Rashidi. He will also be there in spirit with us for sure. So you're not going to want to miss this opportunity to be a part of this. Please go to Arcade Tours /One Africa to register for the trip and the conference. With that, we're going to bring in everyone that were on our panel, and we're going to pick up where we left off in our discussion. So, Brother Jabari, Dr. Jeffries, before we got cut off, we was talking about, he's given us great examples of Kemetic philosophy as it relates to mother, father, and child. Can you elaborate on that in terms of the God concept and just how important that was for Nile Valley culture and civilization?
Oh, sure. I was enjoying the entire conversation, and I'm saying, I mean, Dr. Jeffries has all kinds of stuff that over his walk that we definitely, I mean, I don't know where the Dr. Jeffries library will actually end up, but wherever it is, I'm gonna have to get an apartment next door because some of the stuff that he has, some of the pictures that he has, there's a Black Madonna statue underneath the Christ the Redeemer. Who knows that? You know what I mean? So these are things that are of critical importance when you have been as critically important to the nation, the international community of Africans, as Dr. J has been over these decades. You accumulate knowledge that needs to be shared long into the future. So I'm really, whenever I sit with him, I always learn so much, and so I'm pleased to be here. I did want to tag in a little bit on the discussion of this amazing statue in Senegal that I was supposed to see this year and didn't get to. The king of Morocco did some stuff, and I wasn't able to get to Morocco or Senegal this year. But I, honestly, what we're talking about when we talk about HAPI is how you control and replicate your image and your interest, right? These are things that we need. How do we generate the things? How do we give birth to that reality that we are seeking and that is necessary for us to move into power. And in many ways, when we think about Kemet, we think of the symbol of divine life can be considered the Ankh, right? The symbol of divine life can be considered the Ankh. And of course, at the top loop can be considered the feminine principle. The bottom pole could be considered the masculine principle. And then we see the offspring. This concept of family in the generation of our everlasting selves is something that we see in Kemet, and exactly what we are seeing here in Senegal. Clearly on the African continent, we see the African man, woman, and child coming up out of the rock, the foundation. As they point forward towards the West, they are actually saying our unified actions will be able to create, to give birth to the future that we are looking to build. And so in many ways, we are seeing two different takes on the same of the fundamental African philosophy. And this is so powerful and so exciting that I think that everyone needs not only to visit the statue, to see the statue for themselves, but they have to understand that it is through this collaboration of Africans worldwide that Africans will once more move to the forefront of human civilization. We often talk about how many Chinese people there are on the planet, how many Indians there are on the planet, but there are as many Africans on the planet. And we are in the places where the resources are. If we actually would move together in unified thought, we would absolutely catapult ourselves to the forefront of human civilization. Now, I'm not going to say that that process will be easy, because there are those who are not going to like that we're taking back control of the resources that are our birthright. But I'm going to tell you, it will be necessary, not just for African people, but for the rest of the world, because the younger people on the planet are careening us off the side of the planet. You know what I mean? Look at we talked about the future of climate change, and it's just here, right? It's just here. And the younger people don't have a sense of how to properly manage resources and to create and generate, to give birth to our interests. It is the elders that must do that.
Facts. And I like how you call them the younger people careening us off the cliff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so when we look at, you know, this Renaissance statue and we make the connection to the monuments of ancient Kemet, or the philosophy of Nile Valley civilization, one thing we see here is one Africa. And the conference in Kemet next year speaks to the connectivity and confluence of African nations and African civilizations and African people. The conference presenters will be touching on various different perspectives of how the people on the African continent are linked either through ethnicity, linguistically, or geographically and otherwise. But all this will come out. So we're setting the framework for establishing the fact of African primacy. So it's very important that we are a part of this. And Jabari, Osaze, I'm going to put you on the spot here, sir. You have to be there. I know you have some difficulties in making it. It's an historical event, and it's something of our era that you cannot miss. Not that you don't want to miss, that really you cannot miss.
I can't.
No. You can't be like you really want to right now. You really have to.
I'm thinking. I'm sitting here listening to you and thinking, I have to find a way to get there.
You absolutely. Even if you just come for the conference, you have to be a part of that. You cannot be who you are and not be a part of this.
I'm be excited.
Experience.
It's gonna. Yes, I mean, just the folks that you mentioned. The I want to be the person in the elevator when all those people just have like just the conversations that happen when people get a chance to cross pollinate. What will happen when that happens? So yeah, we have to find a way to be there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's why you gotta figure this shit out. Let me know, but you gotta be there.
Yeah,
you know.
I hear you. Yeah,
and that's extremely important. Dr. Jeffries, we talked earlier about we talked earlier about the book that Hassan Jeffries wrote in regards to the Lowndes County. We're going to mention that too, and I didn't want to put brother, and Shafleesh is putting up in Shomari too. I didn't want to put brother Shomari on the spot, and like I did Jabari, But we're going to talk to Shomari and see what his thoughts are. And we'll see him this weekend and see if he'd be interested in coming and being part of this experience.
He can do that because he's already beat me up for about not figuring out how to get there. So he was going to come after you next, Shomari.
So
I think he felt bad because he already kicked me out the house real early. So he ain't want to slap me twice.
Listen, I'm trying to be a nice guy, man. I was like, damn, brother was waiting a half hour for everybody. But listen, you're more than welcome to stay and be a part of this discussion. We're going to go back for a second to where we were earlier, Lowndes County. So because I just don't want to lose this, because the people who we know got hurt, fought, and died for what we would call certain freedoms, certain liberties we have today. We want to make sure we acknowledge those people, because we can't leave any, I guess, use Charles Barron's words in HAPI, we can't leave no area uncontested for our liberation. And we have to utilize everything at our disposal. So the history of Lowndes County and the Edmund Pettit Bridge, can you please talk about that and the sacrifice people had to make and what they had to endure going through that struggle? Dr. Jeffries?
Oh, okay. I didn't. Yes. The history of Africans in the New World and their struggles is something that we have to collectively document. We can't leave the Haitian Revolution as a single activity. It was a continuous activity, and the enormity of that struggle has to be analyzed. In other words, the Haitian Revolution took place during a period of revolutions, and it stands as the true revolution because the revolution, so-called in America, was different colonizers and slave owners changing their location. But the real revolution was the Haitian Revolution. And of course, Toussaint participated in the initial phase, and it was carried out, and the Constitution was created, and it was carried out in the later phase by Dessalines. But Dr. Wade Nobles has written a book on the Island of Means, and it deals with the Haitian Revolution. He asked me to do an intro and Brother Small to do an afterword. And that same Dr. Jacob Carruthers, he's a person we haven't talked about, but Baba Jake and Asa were cousins, both with roots in Texas, but both chose citadels of power to build the great African family. Jake went to Chicago. But Chicago is tough territory, but Jake was able to mobilize and bring the people together and set up the Kemetic Institute. And then, with respect for Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark, he was able to help create ASCAC. That became our organization, linking us up. Asa, his cousin, with Texas roots, he went to Atlanta. So you have these brothers in Chicago and in Atlanta, Dr. Clark and Dr. Ben, globally, but a base in New York. Myself and Professor Smalls there as their lieutenants, carrying out their understanding. And so we have to be able to see it's not a question of Du Bois and Garvey disagreeing with each other, or Booker T. Washington having a different understanding of how you relate to white folks than others, or Kwame Nkrumah having his particular view of African socialism with Walter Rodney. But that doesn't put them in conflict. That puts them thinking in broad dimensions. So we have to learn how to process that information, to pull it together and not to separate us. And so that's the great thing that HAPI has allowed us to do. We've been able to have.
See, like Doc got stuck there. We'll give him a.
Oh, he's back.
Are we still on?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir, Doc.
Oh, okay. So that the processing of a family relationship needs to be understood. But Cheikh Anta Diop was one of the greatest minds to move through the world. And but he was also deep into the tradition. He comes out of a African tradition in Senegal. And so he respected that tradition. And then he comes out of a spiritual tradition of the Morids. And the Morids, again, an Africanized power relationship that does not include Mecca. In other words, Touba became the Mecca for the Morids in Senegal. So here is this Diop coming from this deep soil in Durbal in Senegal. And then he has a tradition of young manhood coming from the Morids. And then he is successful in his academics, and he gets a chance to go to France. So he masters another part of it. But in looking at the world, he realized that the Africans in the New World had a great role to play. And so he moves with that power equation. And so we have to synthesize these ideas, these transformative ideas that these brothers and sisters brought to us. It's a most fantastic experience. There's nothing Harvard can do to master that, or Yale. There's nothing even our Negro institutions can do, because they are models of the European institution. Howard is just a fantastic institution. It comes out of the struggle in the Civil War, and it's named for General Howard. But it also is constrained in doing what they need to do to synthesize. Hansberry could not be African in the fullness of Howard. He had to suffer. And but luckily, people picked up his burden and carried him over the finish line. Even great Africans like Chancellor Williams, he was part of the school in Howard. Around him was not only you had Chancellor Williams, and you had the Hansberry School. And who wanted to get to the Hansberry School so he could expand his knowledge at Lincoln? So one of our good friends, Philpott, had a car, and he used to move Nkrumah from Lincoln University. 95 goes right to the campus just about, and he would take him in his car to go to the Hansberry group. And these great minds were there. In spite of Howard's trying to be in the middle of things and not be too radical, it still produced this African consciousness, with Chancellor Williams producing his book, Leo Hansberry. And so Nkrumah got an African-American, African-Caribbean experience at Howard on the weekend. The next weekend, he would go to Philadelphia, and the traditions of Du Bois, the Cheikh Anta Diop of his time, the great mind. And so he'd have a chance to expand his education at Howard. And then to complete this triangle relationship between Lincoln and then Howard, and he went to New York. And the rumor was that he slept on the subway because things were tight. No. If he slept on the subway, he just because he was too occupied. He went to Lincoln to become a preacher, and any preacher man going to New York would be welcome. A preacher man from Africa, all he'd have to do is walk into the door and knock and say, "I'm here." They would make sure he had a place to stay. They'd make sure he'd have food. He'd say a few words in the Sunday session. So. And Nkrumah knew what he was doing when he was moving. He was expanding his consciousness. And that's what we have to see, not these individual differences where you can fight over who was a socialist and who was not this and whatnot, who was a Marxist Leninist. You find the synthesis, and that gives you this enormity. And Nkrumah he wasn't looking for the Apollo when he went into Harlem. He was looking for the African History Club, and that's where Dr. Clark was with his mentor, John Jackson, who didn't have a formal education, self-taught. One of the greatest minds walking among us, John Jackson, humble. I gave him his official job at City College, and we kept him going for another 3 years. And then that's as far as you could extend a visiting professor. Usually it's only 1 year, but to extend it out to 2 and extend it out to 3, I fought them. I said, this man didn't have a chance to go to the school system that white boys went to go to Princeton and Yale and Harvard. But he was able to self-teach him this great knowledge. And so they had to accept it. Here's his volume 1. Here's another volume. Here's another volume. And then when he finished at City College, the family in Chicago took him up. Jacob Carruthers said, send him here to Chicago. And they kept him going for another 3 years. See, this is the story that we've got to understand, that our people knew how to work around these systems and make it happen. And so the Kemetic institution emerged from a seed in Chicago. Chicago is one of the hardest cities in the world. You talk about even the Italian, even the mob had a big fight in Chicago. They would have shootouts on the subway. We think that the mob stuff is serious now. But the African seed was able to grow with the Kemetic Institute. And it helped to produce these organizations. It helped with the ASCAC and AHSA, the National Council for Black Studies, the Society of this and the Society of that. So no matter how you look at it, the mistakes that may have been made, the conflicts, the personalities, Cheikh Anta Diop was absolutely right. And his partner, his young partner, Theophilus Benga, were absolutely right. The rise was going to come from the West and then bounce back to the East. And so that's what has happened. Theophil was in Paris, and a young we're not supposed to use the mentor thing again. That's too Greek. But Jegna. So Theophil had this fantastic experience in Paris, learning, but he came from the heart of darkness, so-called white folks stating that the Congo is the heart of darkness. But out of that area of the richest part of the world, Theophilus Benga was able to go to Paris and then connect with Alioune Diop and the Cheikh Anta Diop. And then he physically came to America to teach. And the first place that he taught in America was with Dr. Molefi Asante at Temple University in Philadelphia. And he was there for several years and brought that authenticity of being with Cheikh Anta Diop. He was with Diop and himself while we were at a major conference with Emperor Haile Selassie and a couple of hundred scholars that are dealing with Africa. While we were in Addis with this fantastic experience where Haile Selassie met with the 200 people that came to be a part of this conference and stood in the stool room, in his throne room, for hours, standing there, shaking everybody's hand. But when Dr. Clark and him met, that was light coming together, and I can still see and feel Dr. Clark standing before Haile Selassie, and they had this togetherness. Well, while this was happening in Addis, Cheikh Anta Diop and Theophilus Benga were in Cairo. They were taking on the scholars. The two of them were taking on the scholars in Cairo, and they were so prepared and so together that there was no competition. In other words, they came prepared, the others came to jive, and they got their butts beat. So for me to have the experience on the continent, one in Addis, and then knowing that Cheikh Anta and Diop were together in Cairo, and just let me add that Cheikh Anta never had the teaching experience. He came for the visit, but his partner, our brother Theophil, did. When he went back to build his university in Brazzaville, in his homeland, he again was doing great things, but then the politics and whatnot forced him out, and by the luck of, in other words, he was so physically in shape, he was able to run out of Brazzaville through the forest and through the so-called jungle, and he was able to get into a safe haven again, and continue his journey. So he got to Paris, he got himself situated, and then they needed on the West Coast, they needed him, and I suggested that Wade and others were looking for some leadership there. He possibly can plant his African roots in the Bay Area, and he did. He went to San Francisco. So to see this interrelationship and him being when Wade and the others were there, and here's a homegrown African who was looking for us, and we were looking for him, and out of him comes these branches of this knowledge, and we have to work that. We cannot just work the economics, politics, and culture. That interrelationship of creating a Jegna relationship of the elders with the youngers and reaching out to the others. I mean, I just that's been a part of me. Can you imagine me in Paris?
Hey, Doc, I want you to hold that thought because I got to come back to you for something. I just want to just real quick, just thanks everyone for coming back into the broadcast. Those who are there, please again like, comment, and share. And Dr. J, I also want to come back to you. Got a question of doing a census, doing an analysis of Hassan Jeffries' writing, and kind of go back to that, and maybe we'll conclude with that. Brother Shomari, just in terms of looking at the African Americans, what do you feel our role is in this global African experience?
I mean, I think that there are many. I think that, part of that requires a strategic analysis, right? I think that in the spirit of the diaspora and Pan-Africanism, I think that like one of these things, like we need to do an inventory of where our strengths, our assets, our weaknesses are, depending on where we presently positioned and located, right? Like that to me is an area of Pan-Africanism that I feel like was happening when Malcolm was meeting, in Africa with people like Nkrumah and Julius Nyerere, and traveling through Africa and really doing some conversations with Fidel, and like really thinking about, okay, what are the strengths and weaknesses? If we were actually going to put this puzzle together, let's play to each. So I think in many ways that's something for us to be determined. I think often we accept the moniker that maybe we are the cerebral glue that holds the idea of Pan-Africanism together. I'm not going to debate that, but I also think that there's some very material, strategic, like what is the strength that we bring to this game? Is it our economic resources or our spending power? Is it that our voice is probably one of the most powerful voices across the globe when we choose to use it correctly, right? The African-American voice can be that voice. Are we leveraging our cultural power in a way, and how could that add to other movements and situations across the globe, right? Are we best educated? Like, I think that these are questions that every place across the diaspora, whether we're in Brazil, Cuba, Haiti, Senegal, like there needs to be something that's convening us to actually do this type of inventory. Because to me, the fact that, and I don't know, maybe I wasn't invited to the spot where this happened, but if we're serious about power and agenda, this is literally the first step that you do. It's an asset inventory. Where, our brothers and sisters in London and France, what do they bring to the table, and who, so this level of the inventory I think needs to happen. There are some things that I just offered that I think, but I don't know that they're true. Maybe when we sit down and actually do this at a real economic, political, cultural, and go through all of these areas to see who has the strengths, maybe we don't rate like we think we rate. But I think that these are the real questions, the real kind of in the room, across the globe, several conferences where people are coming together and say, okay, if we're going to put together a global Black power inventory, one of the people I've seen calling for this, and I don't even know if he's still with us, is Chinwezu out of Nigeria. Because his thing has been, look, if Africans don't figure this out in the 21st century, we may no longer be a viable, powerful force. And so we really need to begin to look at where we have real Black power across this diaspora, and then begin to use that Black power for the purposes of our sovereignty.
Thank you. Thank you. Before we go to Brother Jabari, I just want to give a quick shout out to Nancy Marshall and Rashamela. These two lovely sisters will be with us in the now. Thank you for your support. We appreciate you. They will be there during the study tour and conference in Egypt. Again, shout out to Nancy Marshall and Rashamela. My brother Jabari, you want to chime in here and decide what you think of this? Now you're muted, Jabari.
That's really a powerful question. It really is. On the question that you just asked, Brother Shomari, and I love his take on it. I think that it speaks to some of the things that we need to consider in order to figure out what's next, right? So Africans have destroyed our chains throughout the world in many instances. And I know that there are still some areas where Africans are still being abused at the level of chattel slavery. But for the most part, Africans throughout the world have destroyed our chains. So the question is, well, what's next? And as Africans in the Americas, Africans in the United States particularly, I think I've always thought that there were like sort of four things that we offer this next discussion. On one token, I'll grab something from INCOBRA, from the group that really began to discuss the importance of and really organize around reparations in the 80s primarily. There are obviously folks that did it before. People forget Callie House. People forget Callie House. She went to prison for reparations. Anyway, you got to take history. We have to study this history. But I think that Africans in the United States can be considered the new African. I think that we look at the continent and we say, this is our home. And in some ways, there are continental Africans that actually see their nations, their countries, as the things that divide them. African Americans don't view the continent that way. And maybe that is one of the things that we have to offer as Africa as a continent decides its path forward. I think that the concept of an African Union is something that Africans in the diaspora we just get it, right? You know what I mean? And perhaps we have to. I had a conversation with the brother recently where he said, well, what kind of African are you? How come you call yourself an African? You don't call yourself one group of people. I said, brother, we are actually the combination of several groups of people. Even if you look at DNA, you don't just say you're one group of African people. You mix with lots of others. And so that's part of what we have to offer. And so that, I think, is the kind of fodder that feeds our Pan-African zeal. And that's one of the ways we should look at it. I think that also when we think about the African American, we think about the fact that we understand white supremacy at a different level than other groups have. I think that even as I talk to my family, members of my family that are in the Caribbean or in South America, because the hand of white supremacy was sometimes obscured. They could live in environments where primarily there were people of African descent and others, and the hand of white supremacy could be controlling things at the 30,000-foot view rather than on the ground. Sometimes I don't think that they always understand white supremacy like African Americans do, the folks that had to live in the house with the European and deal with white supremacy at that level. And so I think that's one other thing that we offer. Two more things. I think that our economic wherewithal is not something to be undermined. Definitely, it's not something to be undermined. We have to recognize that we have fought, died, bled, and freed ourselves in the strongest economic nation in the world. And that also means that while our communities struggle, if we actually have a unified purpose for our dollars, we will be one of the most powerful economic forces on the planet. If people are confused about that, ask the government of Ghana exactly what happened when someone said, hey, 2019 is the year of the return. Ask how many billions of dollars went into the economy of Ghana, so much that now they have a new initiative called Beyond the Return, because they recognized, hey, wait a minute, they really want to be here. And finally, that also dovetails on my final point. And we have a hunger to be welcomed back on the continent. We have a hunger to be welcomed back on the continent. And so I think those four things actually mean that African Americans offer some things to this global polity of Africans at home and abroad that I think that we will be truly useful towards the next steps in elevating Africans back to the point. I always use this phrase, back to the forefront of human civilization. For most of human civilization, Africans were at the forefront of human civilization. I'm going to say that again. For most of human civilization, Africans were at the forefront of human civilization. Those things that we have been suffering with are new things. When I teach the history of Kemet, when I teach the history of ancient Africa, I can talk about 40,000 years of history easily. I skip over 500 years all the time. I can skip over 400, 500 years just because the history of the African is that long. And so we have to recognize that the things that have happened to us recently should not mark us going forward. It is time now for us to return to the place that we were for the majority of human civilization.
Thank you, Robert Jabari. So in closing, Dr. Jeffries, you want to leave us with any words of wisdom?
Well, usually I try to leave with a very powerful statement in reference to Cheikh Anta Diop's great work, one of the classic works, Civilization and Barbarism, which Dr. Clark gave me the responsibility of going to Europe and to translate it. In other words, and I just come from California and setting up the Black Studies Department and there in 69, 70, 71, 72. And then I told him, Dr. Clark, we're setting up the program in New York. I just can't leave just right now. But after we had a big activity in the early 80s, and then I said, I can leave. And so I did take the responsibility, the charge that he gave me, to go and try to translate this enormous work, one of the greatest works ever. And unfortunately, even though je parle très bien le français, presque comme le français, en effet, mes études de doctorat étaient faites dans la langue française, I have no problem with the French language. I learned it over in high school starting. But this was not the ordinary French or even scholarly French. This was scientific French. In order for me to get at this, I had to have 40 books to translate the first 100 pages. It was kicking me in the butt. And so luckily, there's somebody always looking out for me. And so the creator said, put that aside and open up your mouth at the World Council of Churches in reference to the struggle in South Africa. And so I challenged the head of the World Council of Churches that you're not doing enough in the struggle in South Africa, and the world churches need to get together and really help the struggling people of South Africa. So Dr. Philip Potter was the head of the World Council. He was childhood buddy of my deputy chair at City College, Professor Edward Scobie. And so Dr. Potter said, Dr. Jeffries, if you think we're not doing enough in the struggle in South Africa, I put you in charge of a task force to deliver to the suffering people in Southern Africa. And so I leaped for joy because I could put the Diop book on the shelf and have an excuse to hide and then get into this. And I wrote edited the book, South Africa in Crisis. And I got into it. In other words, I had to look at all of the teletypes that came over, or cables, et cetera, et cetera. And we produced this enormous volume that told of the struggle there. The women, how they struggled against the destruction of their homes, and black men handled the bulldozers, but they were smart enough to get the message to the black women. They called it the black dot. That meant they're going to take the black people's land. So they would let the black women know that we're coming. So make sure you wrap up your important stuff, roll up the tarpaulins and the big sticks you use, and then go into the night. And that's what they did. So they were able to take down their so-called shanties, and Charles, take down the so-called shanties, and then put them back up after the bulldozers came and cleared the land. So the indomitable resistance of Africans against their oppression was what I was able to, and of course Steve Biko, the Malcolm X of his time and his people, and he said very clearly that he was prepared. The most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor was the mind of the oppressed. And so they made sure they bashed his brains out of the brain cage. But that did not stop the young people from moving on the spirit of his revolutionary initiatives. And the young kids carrying Hector Peters, carrying this younger boy, he's 12 years old, carrying him out of the struggle. That lit the flame in Southern Africa that spread to Namibia and other places. So we are on a victorious path, no doubt. And Charles was trying to be helpful, and so he got this volume. And this is not the one that he should have gotten for me. This is my original Cheikh Anta Diop book that I used for translating, and so
it's just in French. I was trying to find a copy of it.
Oh my goodness, where is it?
But what the summary of that, what Cheikh Anta Diop said, he's dedicating. This is a revolutionary Muslim intellectual, Marxist, and all the combinations that one could find. And what he said, that he was dedicating this work to this great brother because Alian Diop, because he's the one who didn't get the fame, but he had the key position to support people. And when Cheikh Anta Diop's defense of his dissertation came, as I mentioned, they had 200 to 300 professors there, which is unheard of, to support him. And you had thousands of us in the street supporting him. And so for me, it was a great moment for me to be at the Sorbonne, a pillar temple. And near the Sorbonne, you had the, en Rue des Écoles, you had the Collège de France, which was the undergraduate work. And what Alian had done was to make sure people were there to support Cheikh Anta. And he finally, after 3 tries, got his doctoral dissertation approved. And the rest is history. He kept growing and growing and linking up with others. And one of his great links with the elder was Alian Diop and Madame Diop, who had the Presence Africaine think tank and publishing house. But he also linked with his younger brothers like Theophile Obanga to show us that it's not about the individual achievement, it's about the collective coming together to let this truth rise up and empower our people. So,
all right. Well, I definitely want to say thank you to everyone coming out to being a part of this extraordinary panel tonight. Thank you, beloved Dr. Jeffries, Baba Jeffries, for being here with us, Brother Shomari. Thank you not only for tonight, also for Saturday. And Brother Jabari Osaze, same thing with you, not only tonight and also for Saturday. Look forward to the screening. And definitely want to give a shout out to Scott Benson, who came, spent some time with us, and gave his perspective on the political arena. We look forward to seeing everyone in the cities when HAPI arrives. If not, we will look forward to seeing you guys in Kemet in February. If not, we look forward to seeing you guys online. Definitely much love and respect. If you brothers can hang out in backstage briefly, and I'll close up the show. I'll be with you momentarily.
And Brother Taki, you will make sure that there'll be the female component of the struggle in one of your next presentations, because the sisters are out there.
Oh, always.
Including my wife, including Marimba Ani, Dr. Ani, including a whole host of others. Wade Noble's partner has been in a wheelchair, but she goes to a wheelchair to a conference like she did in Senegal, which was one of the great. She was so powerful, so strong that my wife had to follow her, and I was hoping that she could, and she did. And so Rosalind raised it up after she did, and then the doctor, Senegalese doctor, saw these two women come up, and she raised it up. I mean, so we've got to get copies of tapes of some of these interactions we had. Now, you have the young men. I'm glad they're there because I'm getting tired. At 84, you're supposed to have a break. But Andrew, I'm heading toward 90. So, but I'm glad there's so many of you coming in and carrying this heavy weight. So we ain't going there alone. We're going there together. But Brother Taki wants you sisters to know that sisters are in the struggle in a meaningful way. And we want to make sure that no one feels that because of their gender, you go into the Ashanti and they talk about the great kings. In fact, my name, Nana Kujua Ajaman II of the Gogo Stool, combines two Ashanti names. But the spirit of the fight in Ashanti is Ya Asantiwa. And she had said to the men of Ashanti, if you all can't take up the fight against these British who want to defame us by putting their behinds on our golden stool, then we women will take up the fight. And so this whole history is so fantastic. It's for us to grab and help us grow. That I'm glad that you have found a way to do it and share it. So I had to give you a pat on the backside. So don't think it's the wrong pat.
That's with the help of everyone, all those included. Yourself, everyone has been a part of this, and we got to keep it going. So I will speak to you, brother, soon. I just want to close out, everyone. Thank you again for being a part of this, and I'll be with you momentarily. Wow. Just like Dr. Jeffries just said, wow. It's been a wild experience, been a wild morning. Started off early this morning at 10 o'clock. We did the live on Instagram with Anthony Browder. He was in Egypt. We were talking about the conference. For those who have not seen that discussion, you can go over to his Instagram page, and it was a powerful discussion. Definitely want to check that out. Want to definitely say thank you to everyone for coming back after we got cut off the air. Appreciate that. We appreciate it. In closing, those who, again, have seen the film, there's definitely other ways to support it. Definitely want to be a part of it. Come sign up for the newsletter, hapifilm.com. Please essentially be a part of that experience. Newsletter is a way to stay in touch and stay in tune with things that are going on. Always is the HAPI merchandise. The t-shirts are HAPI. I love this design. I actually love these shirts. Definitely go to hapifilm.com. Get that. Screenings. Next up is Philly, followed by DC, Atlanta, Bridgeport, and Houston. Get your tickets. Tickets are on sale. Shout out to all those in the building. We love you guys. And definitely, if you can be a part of this historical event in Egypt, this experience, come be with it. iCatTours.com/OneAfrica. With that, definitely want to say good night. We love you all. Peace.
I don't know what we can talk about in this nation without talking about white superiority, honestly.
Who defines the meaning of God also defines the relationship between economy and God.
African Americans spent $1.3 trillion last year, making us the 16th wealthiest nation in the world. Why have we not turned those riches into wealth to develop our community?